Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management. Today is Saturday, July 12th. The time is 12 o'clock p.m. Coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida, to bring you the Revere Roundup weekend walkthrough. And going through the past week, overall, it was a light pullback week, a week of digestion after the prior 2 weeks made record highs in all the major indexes, the S&P and the NASDAQ. We did, over the last few weeks, reclaim the 200-day moving average on the Russell and the mid caps as well. But overall, this was a light pullback week. And as we go through the Big Eight, which is the Magnificent Seven plus Netflix, was basically flat on the week, down slightly at 0.05%. The RG8 composite was down 0.55%. S&P 500 down 0.31. The S&P equal weight down 0.41. The NASDAQ 100 down 0.36. And the equal weight was down more at 1.28%. Dow Jones was down 1.02. Mid caps were down 0.59%. Russell 2000 0.63. 60/40 down 0.45. And sticking out like a green thumb, GROTECTION up 0.34% on the week, and Turbo up a whopping 1.42% on their outstanding Bitcoin investments and calls. Going to the trend gauge, again, the coveted 4 green arrows, as well as a continued cautionary flag on the short-term 21-day moving average and the 50-day moving average, as we are somewhat extended above those averages. Getting into what happened last week, just covered the indexes. Trump increased tariffs on Canada from 25% to 35%, and also issued several letters to various countries. He also announced at the end of the week that he would make a major statement on Russia on Monday. So that is something the market will be watching for. He announced a 50% tariff on copper imports and all goods from Brazil, which will take effect on August 1st. Copper spiked to all-time highs last week. Defense Secretary Hegseth issued orders to fast-track drone production and deployment, sending drone makers higher on the week. Bitcoin crushes new highs, with IBIT up over 8% on the week. That was by far the biggest standout for the week in terms of inter-asset correlation. Silver breaks out to multi-year highs as well, up 4.5% on the week. U.S. Department of Defense and MP Materials announced a multi-billion-dollar public-private partnership to dramatically accelerate the build-out of an end-to-end U.S. rare earth magnet supply chain and reduce foreign, i.e. China, dependencies. So you can see, big theme here with defense, with Hegseth, definitely fast-tracking drone production. You've got the tariffs on copper. Copper is a metal that the U.S. wants less dependency on from South America. And you had this Department of Defense and MP Material partnership. So this all points to Trump's promise to make the U.S. less dependent on China and other countries. Also, airline stocks soared with Delta earnings. Boeing rallied on strong delivery numbers. And finally, the State Department issued more than 1,200 termination notices last week, and they're aiming to cut as many as 3,000. The upcoming week ahead, a couple things to talk about here. Let's go back up. Major crypto week legislation to be voted on next week. This includes the Genius Act, the Digital Market Clarity Act, and the Central Bank Digital Currency Act. So those 3 laws will be voted on next week, and it's hopes to pass all 3 bills. So this is a big reason why the cryptocurrencies rallied this past week. Also notable, Saudi Arabia has set ambitious targets for electric vehicles as well as renewables. By 2030, they want over 50% of their power to be generated from solar, as well as several thousand and a huge percent increase in EVs. As always, once a month, we have the top mutual fund buys listed by the IBD. And of course, you recognize many of these names as being consistent uh, companies being bought up. Of note, CCJ was on the list, not quite a billion. Again, several familiar names that just keep climbing. Netflix with another 5 billion. Veritiv, again, Veritiv got hit intraday on Friday when Amazon, or actually Thursday when Amazon came out with their own version of a new cooling system. The stock sold off down to the 50-day moving average, but closed back up. And you can see here there's been a big institutional buying spree in Veritiv. Next tracker also, General Electric was notable, Shopify notable, several names in here. Capital One was one name that was notable, and I added that to the watch list this week. Of course, the usual. Disney was another notable one. And again, this has been forming this huge base and trying to break out of this massive multi-year base. AppLovin, Carvana, and GE Verona. Arista showing up there as well. That's a new name that's, again, been a long-term leader, but lagging severely for the last several months. But again, very good company. Cadence Design, another name. So you can look through these. But again, you can see that a lot of names that on the move, a result of institutional buying, and several of these in the multi-billions. On IBD Live Friday, Eric Kroll, who is one of the co-authors of the Life Cycle Trade, showed a very interesting slide I wanted to bring up this week. And he calls this the back to school sale. And virtually every year, going back to 1998, basically what this says is that after July 15th through the 1st of September, this isn't the NASDAQ in this particular case, but the NASDAQ has broken its 50-day moving average and closed below its 50-day between that period of time. So again, over the next few months, watch out for a correction or a pullback to the 50-day moving average. Pretty much every single year, the only time that it didn't happen was 2020. That was during COVID. But this is the peak to low change. So some of these are pretty big. And of course, this was a bear market. This was a correction. And these were mild drops in here. So we may or may not get anything major, but expect a potential move here. Very high probability. Again, 63% after and 37% before July 15th. So again, we of course are in that period between now and after, most likely. Biggest weekly gainers, again, take a quick look at this. FUTU is a big standout in China. SoFi, big standout. Rocket Lab, Coinbase, of course, on the Bitcoin. And some of these, Astera Labs continued its last couple week push here. And on the downside, cybersecurity names got hit particularly hard last week on no news. CoreWeave sold off, so some of these IPOs got hit. Dave and some other names. Now, finally, entering the first week of earnings of the new season, several financials are coming out. The big ones that we will look at are ASM Lithography, United Airlines, Taiwan Semi, and Netflix. But again, we're going to start kicking off earnings season here. On the heat map for the week, real quick, we had NVIDIA with a 3% gain, Uber with a 1.8% gain, AIM at 3.6%. Coinbase was up big, up over 8%, almost 9%. And some red across the consumer area, defensive. Amazon up slightly, GEV up another 4% on the week, Boeing up 5% on deliveries, GE up 3.4%. Some of the oils and gas names were green on the week, ExxonMobil and Chevron. See, again, Freeport McMoran was up about 4% on the week, I think, on the copper tariffs. On the ETF side, the VIX was down another 4.9% on the week. Silver with a 4.5% gain on the week. Semiconductors were up slightly. Let's see. Natural gas was down, I think, about 4% this week. Brazil down 6% on the tariffs. And big standout here, one of the biggest green is IBIT. Again, both GROTECTION and Turbo hold this. Turbo with a large position in IBIT, as well as other Bitcoin proxies and the energy sector stood out this week. And that is it for the slides. Now let's go to the charts. Looking at the S&P 500 on the week, again, up 3%, digesting 2 weeks prior of all-time highs. RSP right up against the old highs, consolidating here, looking to overtake that 188.16 level. Again, this market's been led primarily by the mega caps and the large caps, but breadth is starting to broaden out. Q's down 0.36%. Looking at the daily here, just holding nicely above the 80 MA. Nothing overly bearish about this past week. Q equal weights were down 1.28% as underneath the surface more names were down, again below the 8 EMA, but held support above this old high of 136.19. Dow Jones down 1% on the week as a handful of names were down in the Dow 30. The mid-cap index took a breather down 0.59% after spending the last couple of weeks above the 200-day moving average and the 10-week moving average. Russell also with a 0.63% pullback, but again, the second week straight above the 200-day moving average and the 10-week moving average. And these, as you can see, these these weekly moving averages are starting to either flatten out here in the intermediate term, still heading down on the 10, but overall curling up and starting to go above. VIX was flat on the week, 0.12% up, still hanging in that 16 range. Dollar was up 0.7%, extremely oversold, and again, potential mean reversion trade as this is multi weeks down and down a lot on the year. GLD up 0.65% in a consolidation. Gold miners down almost 1% on the week, and silver with a breakout here. Not quite all-time highs, still below these 2010, 2011 highs, but silver has been very strong, and we've highlighted that several times. Bitcoin, huge breakout here, just beautiful. Ted's been talking about this ad nauseum, and he's been dead right on it. Congratulations, Ted. And overall bond market down slightly on the week. The 20-year Treasury was down 1.36%. Yields were up 1.95% on the 30-year and up 1.7% on the 10-year as the tariff, Trump initiating the tariff talks here again, and the tariffs on Brazil and Canada. Bonds sold off on this on the week. MAG 7 up 0.55%. Now let's get into the MAG 7. Apple down 1% on the week, just kind of, again, still well below its 200-day moving average, well off the lows. Not much progress here, relative strength still lagging. Amazon with a 0.72% gain on the week and a 3-week tight. Microsoft new all-time highs up 0.9%. Definitely the strongest of the MAG 7. Meta backed off 0.2%, but is just below all-time highs. NVIDIA, again, reasserting itself up 3.5%. So I take that back. This is the strongest of the MAG 7 on the week. And broke out of a nice, obvious base, cup with handle base, and continued on the week. again, massive earnings on NVIDIA. I mean, $4 trillion company after this week, accelerating earnings, accelerating sales. I mean, this is insane. Compare this to Apple, which trades at almost 30 times earnings with single digit growth and virtually no earnings growth. I mean, this is insane. Uh, again, 50 times earnings with 50+% sales growth and pretty much 50% earnings growth. So by no means an expensive stock. Google, decent day on Friday, still building this low cup with handle, up 3.37%. Netflix pulled back 4%. Tesla just basically flat on the week. And that is it for the Mag 7. Let's go into the watch list for the week. Going to go through this kind of fast as a lot of these names are still extended and consolidating. Again, just one of the top names out there, CCJ. And again, we showed that as a institutional, the institutions were buying the stock up, basically trading in a 3-week tight range after a big move, looking to potentially consolidate. Backed off to the 20-day moving average on Thursday, but quickly reclaimed the 8-day. And again, if something does fall below the ADMA, we want to see it quickly reassert itself. So again, these stronger stocks have been very difficult to get into. These pullback buys are potentially your only chance to these shorter term moving averages, 21 in this case. Taiwan Semiconductors with earnings this week. Nice push into new highs, backed off a little bit this week. BWX Technologies in the nuclear area sold off 4%, closed below right around its 21-day moving average. Had a little bit of a shakeout on Thursday here. Some of the other nuclear look better, which we'll get to. AS still consolidating. GE Verona with another 4.2% up week, distancing itself from the $500 century mark, and again hitting the profit-taking zone, but again, several shakeouts down to the 21 EMA and holding nicely above the 80 EMA. So again, this is a holding in all of our portfolios and was a follow-through day leader. Credo, looking great this week. Again, had some intraday moves below the 80 EMA, but consistently closing strong and pushing up against the 100 century mark. Appears to be a new leader in the data center area, up 5.25% on the week. And you can see this wall of blue volume over the last several weeks, very strong. Quanta flat on the week. Oklo with a nice pullback buy opportunity here. Shakeout below its averages, reclaim, and decent close on the week here. And held the 10-week moving average. So again, watch for these pullbacks to these 10 weeks, 21-day moving averages. See how these stocks behave because these are the leaders. NewScale up 4% on the week. Another nuclear name. Robinhood up 4.17% on the week, closing toward the highs. Again, last week broke through this old IPO high back here and trading nicely above here. So again, very strong. Avgo, another big time leader in the semiconductor area. Huge move off the lows, backed off just a little bit. This is an institutional favorite. That and NVIDIA in the semi area. Toast, not sure what the heck to do with this name. I did try a buy of this as it broke out and quickly stopped out for 3-4% loss. Again, didn't take a big position in this, as this tends to be the character of this stock, but I thought, well, this time it might be for real. And it wasn't, but it did pull back just into the 20-day moving average, and it's tightening up a little bit. Not sure this is a TML, though. It does have decent earnings growth and decent sales growth coming up. So it's a stock to watch. And again, off these all-time highs of the IPO back here of 69 and change. So definitely a stock putting in this base on base, reset the base here, and really trading flat in this flat base. Jack, again, backed off from this buy pivot. Cooper and the mortgage servicing, just keeping an eye on that with real estate potentially coming back. Oracle backed off 2.8% on the week as it hit the profit-taking zone. AVAV, great day on Friday, up 11%. This is a stock I tried on this day here as it pulled back 6 days in a row, 6 days in a row into this. Just below the ADMA after a huge secondary offering. Again, wall of blue going into the earnings, post earnings, monster gap, wall of blue, and then, of course, post secondary digestion volume and huge volume on Friday. So, again, you can see this on the weekly, new all-time highs, and did give me an opportunity to get into it, which I was pretty pleased with. Kratos, again, huge 15% on the week on the drone fast tracking from Hegseth. Micron trading really nice and tight here, up 1.8%. This is another name that bought on this pullback day and a reversal back here. Again, I'm really trying to be patient since we're extended. I'm looking at these stocks that really just had huge moves. And rode their ADMA, may have pulled back a little bit on, in this case, earnings, which were really good. Just kind of shook out. Didn't even get to the 21 EMA, but again, easy stop loss. Had I been shaken out below the 20 days, I could have lost 2-3% on this, so very low risk entries. Light, another name that I'm in, just tight on the week, nothing major here. Spent a little bit of time, tested the 21 EMA, but on the week got back above both the 21 and the 8. So that's kind of what you want to see. So I'll give this one another week, see how it goes. Roku, still watching this name. Hinge, this is an IPO that I've highlighted, shook out below the IPO breakout and had a great day on Friday. So again, a lot of people are thinking this is potentially new merchandise and might replace a lot of physical therapy. It's really kind of a 3-week tight here now. So this looks very interesting, and I would definitely keep my eyes on this name. Rocket Lab, another good week out of Rocket Lab. TKO just trading tight. Reddit backed off, another example of a stock that could be setting up a nice pullback entry here with a tight stop below this 21 EMA. So again, name we're kind of watching here. Oddity, not much going on here. Coinbase advanced 8.7% on the week. And this is another name that Toddzilla's in, TurboTection's in, and again, with the Bitcoin situation, this is still off the all-time highs going back here. I do think that this is a potential area it's going to be able to reclaim above 400. So definitely trying to hold this name. AMD up 6%. Definitely a huge week for that, and coming back up into these old highs again. Another name that has been acting very strong off these lows, has had a tendency to shake out down to this 21 EMA, didn't quite get there and recovered. So again, you got to watch these pullbacks pretty close. SMCI still consolidating. Uber kind of up on the week, 1.8 into all-time high territory, looking decent. Bluetooth with a nice breakout. Coherent up another 2.6% in the data center area. AGX, okay here. Affirm pulled back 6%. Urban Outfitters tight. Veritiv, this was a shakedown to the 50-day moving average intraday. Closed back above the 21-day. And again, this is another name that had big institutional buys in the last month, and this is why you want to see institutional sponsorship, because guess what? Those guys aren't going to let this stock fail, and stock closed pretty much right at its ADMA. But you're going to want to see this reclaim that ADMA and not just live below that now. But again, that was a pretty nasty shakeout on the Amazon news that they released a new cooling system for their own data centers. But obviously, this closed high in the range on the week, which is a good sign. Guardian Health tight. Ram, this is a name I'm watching in semis, down 2.7%, but again, looks decent. Contract manufacturers trading tight. Freeport-McMoRan up 1%. Again, after copper broke out, they got above the 200-day, had a little bit of a shakeout. This is the day Trump announced the tariffs. They produce about 35% of their copper in the United States, so they are the largest copper producer in the U.S. So they are a beneficiary. SCCO, again, not doing quite as well because none of their copper is produced in the United States, but FCX is a one to watch as a U.S. producer. Transidyme, great week. HIREN in the Bitcoin and data center area backed off 3%. This is another name that very much interests me as it's trading above multi-year highs here. And it is offering a potential pullback into the 80 MA, which might be the best you're going to get on this one. But again, I would position this smaller, especially a $15 a teenager stock, which tend to be more volatile and more difficult. But all this is doing is pulling back into these all-time old recent highs back here. Tapestry with a huge weekend breakout. Nirvana, another institutional favorite, down slightly on the week. Symbotic is a robotics play I'm watching, down 1.7% on the week. Cadence Design was another name in the IBD mutual fund buys, which had multi-billion-dollar buys here, pushing up into the top of this base. And again, if it can get through this long, clean, and simple base, could be a stock to take a position in. Pan American Silver, which is a name I've been closely watching, had a nice breakout on Friday with silver breaking out to multi-year highs, very tight, and nice breakout on some volume here. Ralph Lauren making a move into all-time high territories, new all-time closing weekly highs. ANET turning around, relative strength at 84, but again, distancing itself from the 200-day moving average. All moving averages now in alignment with still a golden cross coming up. Performance Food was a new breakout with relative strength making new highs. Again, nice tight base of 26%. U.S. Food also made new highs on the week, and not quite as strong as Performance. Delta with a move back above all its longer-term moving averages on earnings. As you can see, the airline ETF had a big update on Thursday with the Delta numbers. MP Materials, this is the new up huge, 45%. A little bit wild in here, but again, the government is going to buy everything they produce for the next 10 years. Also put $400 million into them through a preferred offering. Goldman Sachs lending them $1 billion. Definitely a name you want to keep an eye on, as the U.S. is dead serious about eliminating the need to be dependent on China and South America and the BRICS for our natural resources, as well as our key defense inputs. ASTS, great week, flat after a nice move. MicroStrategy breaking out of this little cup base, and has definitely lagged some other Bitcoin proxies like Robinhood and Coinbase. Pulte Home, this is the area we're watching to get an early start in the home builders as it overcame its 200-day moving average. So, again, we're expecting a couple interest rate cuts this year. Unemployment numbers are starting to potentially signal some weakness in the labor market. So lower rates could be a boon to some of these housing makers. LEU, a TurboTaxion holding up 17% on the week. Again, this looks great, and just, again, shook out down to the 21 EMA, held it on several volatile moves back down to it, and just shot up the last 2 days of the week. Dollar Tree, 7% on the week. Teledyne, a new breakout in the aerospace defense. Again, this is number 5 industry group. We've got Boeing in it. Several other names which did really well this week. Again, you can see the government is definitely spending. NATO's spending. Ukraine war is still going on. So lots going on here. Aircrafts. China's buying Boeing aircrafts. Everything looks good here. Train, again, another name in the cooling area. Trading tight. Capital One is a new name I put on the list. 91 relative strength, 94 composite. Very nice numbers coming up here. This is what really alerted me to this one. And I'm seeing 30 to 50% sales growth, 28% earnings growth, 15 times earnings, new all-time highs. A little bit slower of a name, but in the finance area, this looks very interesting. Zillow Group, another name in housing we're watching, up 7.5%. A-Lab, add that to the crazy list like toast. Again, several moves back here, very strong, completely reversed, went down to the 50-day. Huge day on Wednesday, bearish engulfing, close in the middle. I might take a shot at something like this here with a tight stop loss. Not sure. I do think the stock has, again, still a lot of growth left ahead of it, but this is definitely with the action, and I wouldn't size this more than a couple percent. CLS with another nice week. Nextracker backed off after Trump, again, had some executive orders cutting more spending in the green energy area. Palantir with a 5.7% move on the week. DoorDash, another institutional name. Seagate backed off 1%. ATI in the metal, especially metal area. Aerospace looking good. SoFi, another name approaching these old all-time highs that I think we'll eventually see. Needs potentially a little bit of a rest. But again, the best thing you're going to do is see this pull back to the 80 MA and settle down here and maybe build a base. But this is a name I'm definitely watching. Actually, that shouldn't even be on here. Shark Ninjas, and new name I'm watching. CoStar Group, after multi-year drop and just quietness, this is another name in the commercial real estate area that did hit a cup with handle breakout on the week. So just keeping an eye on some of these names in real estate. You can see this earnings line has just been declining now for a couple of years. Now you've got a potential turnaround coming up with a 65% increase in 26 fiscal year earnings. Spirit, Estee Lauder is a new name that showed up on the list as potentially a new stage 2 uptrend after you want to talk about multi-year. Stage 4 here, starting here, going straight down. Again, not sure what's going on here, but turnaround play after 3 negative years and a 49% increase in fiscal 26. Wynn Resorts, nice breakout. Cruise lines we talked about last week. Kava is another name watching as a potential new merchandise play. Again, trend line break on the weekly, but tons of work to do, so don't get too excited about this with a 17 relative strength and the 200-day declining overhead. Just, again, some weekend watching. On Semiconductors, another name, which a lot of these power semiconductors and industrial semiconductor companies, again, you had a couple of years of earnings declines here from $5 a share, $5 a share down to $3, down to $2, and now you've got a turnaround up 36%. So again, most of these are saying that, look at the string of negative numbers on here. This company supplies a lot of EV companies, pretty much all the major auto manufacturers with semiconductors for their various systems. And you can see this is a turnaround play. Citizens Financial, Nike, Valero in the energy area, Southwest Airlines, Boeing, again, new highs on the week, up 5%. Bloom Energy had a pretty nice move here on an upgrade, backed off, a little bit volatile. CB Richard Ellis in the commercial real estate play, Melrose Properties, GE Aerospace. So again, we're getting into some speculative names here, and that's it for the week. Again, thank you for listening to our weekend webinar. If you enjoy what we provide, please give us a like, a share, a repost on X. We're also on several other social media platforms, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great trading week ahead.